It's been said that every quilt tells a story, and it's so true. But I also believe every quilter has a story to tell. I wanted to hear about the people behind these wonderful quilts and thought you'd enjoy hearing about their lives also. Welcome to A Quilter's Life. When Megan Fowler is not behind a sewing machine or chasing a toddler, you can find her enjoying the Colorado outdoors. Yet if that wasn't enough, she is running not only one quilty business, but two. Megan's dream for Modern Moon Quilt Studio is to marry her special love for vintage design and her fondness for modern quilting, to be able to share her vision of modern nostalgia with the quilting world. Then not long ago, she created Quilt Scouts to bring quilting adventures to quilters. She hopes to encourage us to step out of our comfort zone and try something new in a fun way. Megan, thanks so much for joining us on A Quilter's Life.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I think the way we met was I reached out to you when I saw a post about Quilt Scouts.
Yes. You had sent me an email wanting to chat about Quilt Scouts and this new membership we've got going on.
It's pretty exciting. But before we get there, let's jump back to tell us where you were born and raised.
I was actually born overseas. My dad was in the military, but we moved back to the US when I was 2, and I grew up in South Dakota. And then my freshman year of high school, we moved to Illinois, and I spent high school and college in Illinois.
So there wasn't too much moving around when you were growing up.
No, there really wasn't.
Do you have a favorite childhood memory?
Probably my summers growing up in South Dakota. I grew up in the Black Hills. It's a beautiful part of the country, and it's where Mount Rushmore is. So, anyone who's familiar with Mount Rushmore. So that's where I spent most of my childhood. But summers there were always a lot of fun. We would go camping. 4th of July at Mount Rushmore was always fun. So yeah, just spending summers outdoors in the Black Hills, I think will always be a really special memory for me.
Wow. That was one place I always wanted to take my family, and we didn't make it there.
Oh, it's so good. We love it.
Did you have employment other than quilting?
Yes. In a previous life, I was a chiropractor. So I'm technically Dr. Megan Fowler, but I don't practice anymore. So my quilting business is actually the second business that I started. The first one was my chiropractic practice. So I ran that for 7 years, I think. And after I had my son, I just decided I didn't want to be in office every day seeing patients. It just wasn't bringing me much joy anymore. So I sold it. The practice still exists. It's still a great thriving practice. I'm just not a part of it anymore. So that's what I did before I started Modern Moon Quilt Studio.
Wow. I really have respect for chiropractors. I was always afraid to go to one because I'd heard from others. It seemed like once you go, you have to keep going. But I was in such pain this past year. I went to one and he fixed my problem and taught me what I needed to do, and I don't have to go back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's definitely some parts of the practice that I miss. I really loved connecting with all my patients. Some of them had been with me since I first opened my practice. So they were with me for several years, and I got to know them and their family. And I love giving people relief like you. It was very, very rewarding part of the practice, but there was a lot of it that I just got so tired of. The business side of it, the insurance, the licensing is like, I can't do that. I do miss parts of it.
Yeah. Where do you live now, and how did you get there?
We now live in Colorado. We moved out here after I graduated from chiropractic school. When I graduated, I knew I wanted to open my own practice and start my own business. So that was going to require us putting down some roots. And we just were like, okay, where do we want to be long-term? We both loved Colorado. We didn't want to stay in Illinois. I went to school in Iowa, and we had visited Colorado and just loved it here. So we're like, let's do it. So we just packed up, moved to Colorado, figured it out from there.
Did it take a long time to set up your practice or like within a year?
Within a year, we moved here in the summer and I had opened my practice the following spring. So it took several months to find the location, build it out, get everything set up. But yeah, it wasn't too long in the big scheme of things.
If you could talk to your great, great, great grandchildren, how would you describe yourself to them?
Those are some deep questions. I think I am an entrepreneur at heart. I've always been entrepreneurial since being a kid, as discussed with the chiropractic practice, the quilting business. But even as a kid, I remember starting little businesses and, little stands and trying to sell stuff, things like that. I feel like I am kind of a jump in and just do it and figure it out as I go type of person, which sometimes works out great and sometimes, it doesn't, but we just figure things out as we go. I'm not afraid to make mistakes and I'm always learning. I would hope that my family knows how much I love them and everything I do is ultimately for them. I mean, part of my drive of starting my quilting business was so that I could be home with my son full time. So he's at the heart of pretty much everything I do, and my day is centered around him almost exclusively. So yeah, just how much I love my family and all the hard work that we do really pays off and shows. And I hope that shows for them.
Great. And is there something you would like to tell them?
I would tell them that what you do matters. It may not feel like it matters in the moment, but you are important and you have an impact. And it's most important to just do what brings you joy, what's most authentic to you, and to not follow someone else's dreams, but to stay true to yourself and to work hard and just leave everything better than you found it.
Thanks. Now, besides quilting, are there other crafts that you do or have done in the past?
Let's see. I embroider. Mostly I embroider quilt labels and things like that. Since having my son, I do a lot of little projects for him. Like recently, I've been making some play food out of felt. So just sewing and stitching, just things for him to play in his play kitchen and things like that. So embroidering, quilting, just kind of random sewing projects, nothing specific. I'm also a new Cricut owner. So that's been fun crafting on my Cricut, making party decorations, birthday decorations, things like that. As far as crafting goes, I used to paint. I don't paint anymore. It isn't something that I've been actively doing, but I used to do that for fun. And then photography. I did photography classes in high school and college, I think. Did I do photography in college? I can't remember, but definitely in high school. And that was a hobby of mine since then. I love doing photography. I have a nice digital camera that I use. I like to get out for things. And yeah, I think that's it.
On your embroidery, do you embroider with a machine or by hand?
By hand embroidery. I never learned how to do machine embroidery. I think my Bernina technically can do it, but I do everything by hand.
So when you make a quilt label, do you draw it out and then follow the lines you've written with the thread?
Yes. So I usually design my quilt labels on the computer, either in Canva or some type of just word processor, or I'll get the font and correct text and the right sizing, print that out, and then I'll transfer that onto fabric with carbon paper and then use those lines to embroider.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. That's usually how I do it. I have done a label with my grandpa's signature. So that was kind of more handwritten where I copied his signature and then embroidered that on. And then sometimes if you want to make it really personal, just your handwriting, handwrite something and then embroider that. But usually to make it more legible, in my opinion, I just use the computer printout.
And how about other hobbies?
Chasing after my toddler. That's number one. That's how I exercise. I don't exercise outside of that. But gardening, I love to garden, and my little guy's really gotten into it with me. He loves to go in and water the garden and check on his vegetables. So that was, I would say, kind of a big one of part of our life currently. Baking and cooking. I would love to do more of that, kind of a bit of a time crunch. And again, hard to do with a toddler in tow, but he loves to help in the kitchen. So we do that. what else? Camping, just being outdoors, exploring Colorado. So we just did a kind of last minute trip out to Moab, Utah, which was so much fun, just beautiful part of the country. So just getting out, exploring and enjoying the outdoors. We love that.
Sounds like a lot of fun and things that you could do with your son.
Yeah.
Megan, do you think any of your hobbies or other crafts show up in your quilting? Obviously, your embroidery does.
Yeah, my embroidery. I think my experience with painting and other kind of art definitely plays a role with color theory, choosing color palettes for a quilt that shows up, I feel like, pretty prevalently. What else did I say? The embroidery and the photography too. I love to photograph my quilts and the whole process. A big part of my business is creating tutorials and things like that. So that requires a lot of photography and videography skills. So that shows up there. I think that's it.
Let's jump to who introduced you to quilting?
YouTube. YouTube introduced me. I did not have any family or friends I'm aware of that quilted. So my great grandmother, she was a quilter, but I did not know her at all. She passed when I was really young. I do have a quilt that she made for me. It's a little baby quilt. So that's pretty special treasure that I have. But no, outside of that, I'm trying to remember how I first got down the rabbit hole. But at some point in time, I came across, I think, a YouTube video or something about quilting. And I was like, just thought that, I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. That's interesting. So I just was binge watching YouTube videos about quilting. And I just was like, this is so fascinating. I want to try this. And yeah, so I went to the school of YouTube.
That's interesting that you weren't thinking quilting. That just popped up and drew you in.
Yeah, I don't remember what prompted it, but I just remember it was Christmas time, 2019, because we were driving from Illinois to Colorado and I was in the backseat of the car, just bored, on a road trip. And I was like, just binging these videos. And we got back home late December and I was like, yeah, I'm going to do a quilt. I'm going to make a quilt. And my husband, okay, go for it. I made a quilt and it was, looking back on it, it's just funny, like how much you learn as you go. But looking back on that first quilt is always just a funny for, I'm sure, every quilter.
Did you already have a sewing machine?
I did. I had a sewing machine that my parents bought me when I was probably, I would guess, 8 or 9. I don't remember exactly what year it was, but they had bought me a sewing machine. And I asked them just recently, I was like, why did you buy me a sewing machine? Because I don't remember asking for one or anything. And my mom said that I had shown an interest in just sewing and crafting and thought that I would like it. So I still have that old Kenmore sewing machine and I still have it. And that was what I made my first quilt on, my first couple quilts. And then I recently, maybe a year and a half ago or so, it upgraded to a Bernina. And it was like, I don't even know how to describe it compared to my dinosaur, but it was a big upgrade.
Wow. Whether it's a quilt you made or someone else made, do you have a favorite quilt or a favorite quilt pattern?
I feel like I have a couple favorites for a couple different reasons. I think one of the most memorable quilts that I made was my parents' wedding quilt, which was technically never finished. So after I started my quilting business, my parents brought up this conversation about this wedding quilt. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never seen this quilt. And lo and behold, it was from my parents' wedding. They had all the guests sign a square. And then my mom and my grandmother sewed it into a quilt top, but it wasn't quilted properly. It was like gusseted with like polyfill, I think is what happened. So it went through the wash. It got all lumpy. My mom didn't know how to fix it. It just went into a box and just stayed there. And I had never seen it until a few years ago. I was like, okay, you have to send me this quilt, Mom, or like bring it out next time you come because I have to see this. So she brought it out and I took the whole thing apart with this old, it was this old burgundy fabric that I had to seam rip every block apart. And then I trimmed all the blocks, put it together properly and had it quilted properly. That was just a really, really cool process. And it was especially special because all those signature blocks are from all of our friends and our family. And there are so many signatures on there are from people that are no longer with us, my grandparents and just family friends. So that was really, really special to get to work on that quilt and work with those signatures and actually get it done properly so that now it's on my parents' bed. They use it. They see it every day. It's not just buried in a box somewhere. So that one's really special. As far as quilt patterns go, I think one of my favorites is Happy Camper. I just think that's a really fun design. And it was really fun to figure out how to construct that. I had a little bit of trouble trying to figure out how to put it together the way I want it to go together in a way that made sense in a pattern for other people to replicate. So that was a little bit of a challenge, but I love how it comes together. And it's a bit of a challenge because you have to cut blocks in half. And that's really scary for people, to kind of get over that fear of cutting, their blocks in half. So it's a fun, challenging quilt to put together that I think has a really cool finish. And then I also really love my Hay Scout quilt that I just designed just because it's just fun. I just love the fun pennant design. And I whipped that one up so fast. I don't know how I just designed that one so quickly, but it's like just a fun little quilt.
With all the tools we have to choose from, what's your go-to tool?
So I would say my stripology ruler. I love how efficient that is. And especially a lot of my patterns have a lot of long strips, creating strip sets and things like that. So that comes in really handy. That's one of my favorites. And then my new one, I think I mentioned that I have a new Cricut. My Cricut cuts fabric. So I've been cutting felt for making the things for my kid, but I really want to try cutting quilting fabric for like curves and templates and things. I haven't done it yet, but I feel like if I can figure that out, I think that'll probably be one of my new favorite tools. So we'll see if I can make that happen.
And do you like each step of the quilting process, or do you look forward to one step more than the others?
I love designing and piecing. I don't mind cutting fabric. I don't particularly love basting and quilting my quilts. I feel like that's like blasphemy to say as like a quilter, but it's not my favorite part. I think that might stem from the first couple quilts I did on my small domestic machine. And one, I don't love how it turned out. I don't know what exactly happened, if it was the quality of the thread or something with my tension in my old machine. But again, I didn't know what I was doing, but all the quilting started ripping out the stitches. So it was just so disappointing. I don't know if that just ruined it for me or what, but I don't totally love the quilting process. It's also really hard on me physically to do that. So I've developed a really great relationship with a long arm quilter, and she does fantastic work. But I actually love binding. I love hand stitching my binding. That's a fun, just relaxing way to finish a quilt. I like hand embroidering the labels and attaching those. I would say I like most of the other steps except for the basting and quilting.
I'm curious, when you were quilting those first quilts, did you straight line or were you doing like a stipple?
I did a straight line. On my first one, I just did a diagonal grid. And then I did something similar on my second one that I can recall. And that one turned out better, but it was so hard to wrestle that thing through my little machine. And again, my first machine had a much smaller throat space, so it was much more difficult. I don't know. Looking back on it, I'm like, I don't know how I did that, but I did it. But yeah, just straight lines.
Share your worst quilting experience.
Oh, well, this isn't technically a quilting experience, but quilting adjacent, maybe. I've lost a quilt in the mail. Actually, I've lost 2 quilts in the mail just recently, and it was so traumatic. It was just this past fall. I had mailed them to my long arm quilter, right? So this is one of the risks of mailing your quilts off. They were quilted. She took photos. They looked awesome in the photos. She sent them back, and I never saw them. It was a Christmas quilt I had made just this past fall, and then my second Happy Camper quilt that I was so excited to turn into like a sleeping bag for my kiddo. They're gone. I have no idea where they're at. So that has just been so traumatic. And I just recently had to mail another quilt, and I'm like cold sweat in the mail because I'm so scared that it's going to get lost again.
So what keeps you making quilts rather than doing anything else with your time?
Well, I think one of the primary motivations now is obviously it's become a business. A hobby became a business. So now I write patterns and I have to make quilts for that. But I just love gifting quilts too. That's one of my favorite things is baby quilts and wedding quilts. And I love to make quilts for my kiddo when he hits, different milestones. So that's always so special. I think any quilter can really, there's just nothing compares to gifting something like that. it's also just fun. It's a creative outlet for me. It's just a great way for me to decompress and kind of unplug from other stuff. And I really enjoy the pattern writing part of that. I'm a number cruncher. I love math. So just the math part of it and constructing the pattern and figuring out how it goes together. It's like putting a puzzle together, just all of that. The challenging part of writing a pattern, I find really enjoyable. So just all of that stuff put together. Gosh, I feel like I could go on and on about all the satisfying things that come with making a quilt. But yeah, it's just a special process with such a fulfilling end result.
It really is, especially when you give them away and they love them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So who do you make your quilts for?
Most of my quilts, I would say, end up here at our home. Like the cover quilts for my patterns, I keep all of those. Just those feel really special to me to have the cover quilt saved. But I don't fold them up and put them away. They get used. They're on the couch. They're on the bed. My kid loves to, make forts out of them. Like, I just think for me, I think it's really important that quilts get used in a fun and functional way. They're not just stored away in a box somewhere getting dusty. That's always sad to me when I see like you gift a quilt. I'm like, oh, I'm going to save this and store it away. I'm like, no, wash it, use it. If it gets a hole in it, send it back to me. I'll fix it. Like, it's fine. But then, like I said, friends and family, I love to make quilts for them, gifts for friends, things like that. But I would say the majority of them end up staying at our home.
I love to see them used.
Me too.
What projects are you working on right now?
Right now, I am creating content for Quilt Scouts, which there's different badges and challenges that go along with that. So part of Quilt Scouts is creating content to support that learning process. So right now I'm working on some content for sewing curves. I think I'm going to do a quilted tote bag tutorial. So just tutorials for Quilt Scouts. And then right now we're also getting ready to organize and launch the sweater weather sampler for this year. The first year we did it was last year. So this is going to be our second time doing the sweater weather sampler. So we are writing our patterns, constructing our blocks, testing each other's patterns. I'm working on that. And I'm finishing my Hay Scout quilt. I still have to do the label and bind that one. So those are kind of my 3 quilting projects I have going on right now.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the sweater weather?
Yeah. So me and 8 other friends, so there's 9 of us total. We started calling ourselves last year the 9 Patch Quilt Collective to kind of shorten up our long string of names. But we went in together and launched a fall themed sampler. So each of us designed a 20-inch by 20-inch square block with an autumnal theme to it. And it was huge. We had a ton of participants. It actually kind of blew us out of the water. People from all over the world. We had this big group in Germany that were doing it, in France, in the UK. So that was just a super fun experience. So every week we released another block. So it was over 9 weeks. And every week we had sponsors and giveaways. And then at the end, we had one big giveaway. Yeah, it was a labor of love, but it was so much fun. So anyways, we're doing that again this year, launching. I think we're starting it September 1st. Don't quote me on that because I can't remember what date we landed on, but at the beginning of September. And it'll be the same format. Each of us is designing and releasing a single block, and they'll be released 1 week at a time. And each one, again, is fall themed, autumnal themed. I'm not going to share any of the blocks, but you can go and see all the ones from last year. They're out there on the Instagram and Facebook and stuff. I would say this year, you can see that each one of us as a designer really leveled up. You can just tell that our skills and our design experience just really grew over a year's time. So it's so cool to see these designs. Like, I haven't pieced my sampler yet. I'm going to as I test each block. I'm still picking out my fabric colors and stuff, but I can't wait. I can't wait to piece each of these blocks because they're so cool and so unique, each one of them, just the way they're written and they're constructed. Yeah, I'm super pumped for this year's sampler.
Well, I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but since we're on the subject, I'm curious, how did you meet up with these other quilt designers?
Oh, so it's kind of funny. We all took the same pattern writing course with Amber from Alderwood Studio. So we all took her course it would have been spring of 2021, I think. Gosh, it's all kind of a blur now. I can't remember. But anyways, part of that course, we're put into peer groups so that we can learn together and kind of bounce things off of each other. So we're in these peer groups. So there was 7 of us in that peer group, and we just all hit it off like right off the bat. We just clicked. It was just very, very cool experience. And then we added 2 more designers that were also part of that class, but weren't in our peer group to make 9. So 9 of us total. And yeah, we talk pretty much every day. We chat on Instagram. We've just become really, really close. I haven't met any of them in person. I know some of them have been able to meet in person. I haven't yet. But yeah, we've grown really, really close. And I lean on them for all kinds of stuff, quilting, business, personal. So yeah, it's just kind of funny how we all got thrown into this one peer group and we hit it off.
I got to interview Amber, and she's great.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, we all feel so lucky that we just happened to get connected in that way, because I know that there were some peer groups that didn't have that same experience. They either kind of fizzled out or didn't quite click or whatever. So we all feel super lucky and super blessed that it turned out the way that it did.
Mm-hmm. Share a quilting tip.
Okay, practical tip. Starch and iron your fabrics before you cut them. It makes life so much easier if they're just starched and pressed before you start cutting into them. Nothing's worse than trying to cut a wrinkled, creased piece of fabric only to have to like recut it. And then I think just big picture, a tip is to just get out there and try new things. Don't be afraid to try something new and fail at it. I was going to say none of us are perfect when we start, but I don't think any of us are perfect at any point in time when it comes to quilting. So don't, let that high standard stop you from just jumping in and trying a new pattern, trying a new color palette, trying a new technique when it comes to quilting. So just jump in and just do it. Even if it comes out, turns out and you don't like how it turned out, you did it, you learned a new skill, you learned something from it, you took something from it, you either figured out you liked it or you didn't like it. Just try new things.
Great. Can you describe how you went from having quilting as a hobby and you decided to make it a business?
Transitioning from quilting as a hobby into a business occurred when I was in the process of selling my chiropractic practice, because I was on my way out of the practice. I knew that I was still going to want to do something, even though I was staying at home. And then 2, needed to do something to generate income for myself because I still have, bills and things to pay. So I was really just brainstorming on what is something that I can do from home on my own schedule with a little guy at home. And I decided first to start a blog. Like, you know what? I'm going to try starting a blog. So it was brainstorming ideas on, well, what can I blog about? What do I know? What am I good at? And decided that quilting would be a fun one. So I jumped into blogging about quilting, which turned into doing YouTube videos and tutorials about quilting, and then branched into learning how to write quilt patterns. And it just kind of grew and snowballed from there. It was kind of a slow transition and took time and invested in myself into learning these new skills, because knowing how to write a blog and edit a video and do a podcast, those are all skills that we have to learn. So yeah, that was how I landed here.
So at what point did you officially call it a business?
I'm trying to remember back to when. I want to say I did it right out the gate, because I knew having a business before, kind of how that worked. So I established it, I think, right away when I started my blog and decided that was going to become a business expense first before it became an income, right? And tracking the expenses and income of things. I started not an LLC, but I'm still sole proprietor, but a doing business as name and the sales tax license. I did all that right at the start, I believe.
So you did it right.
Supposedly. Who knows?
Megan, share the name of your business and how you came up with that name.
So Modern Moon Quilt Studio. This was kind of back in the brainstorming of, what am I going to do? Is it going to be a blog? What am I going to call the blog? I kind of came up with the idea of having a blog on a new moon. So I love astronomy, just looking at the stars and the moon. Love to watch the moon, the phases of the moon as they go. And it was a new moon, which just felt so appropriate for starting I was really turning over a leaf. I'm selling my practice. I'm jumping into something new. So I was going to call it New Moon Quilt Studio, but that didn't really flow very well. But I knew I wanted to do modern quilting. So I called it Modern Moon Quilt Studio. And then also with that, I like to launch and release things on full moons and new moons. Any new pattern that I've come out, if the date or the day of the week doesn't make sense, if it's just a random Tuesday, it's because it's a new moon or a full moon. And that's why I like to release things like with the moon cycles. So that's how I came up with that. And then Quilt Scouts is the second business. And that one was pretty straightforward. I wanted to be, I was telling my friend, it was like if Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts and a quilting guild had a baby, that's Quilt Scouts. And so Quilt Scouts was just the most obvious name to give it. There wasn't anything too in depth with that one.
Well, when I saw it on Instagram, I thought, that's brilliant. So I was just really curious. Do you remember when it popped in your head?
Yes, I do. And I'm laughing because it's a very silly story. So I told you I have a little boy. He's 3. We go to the library often. We check out books. One of our favorite authors is Bob Shea. He has just these funny kids books that literally my husband and I will laugh out loud at. They're just written very, very comically. Anyways, the one I was reading to him one bedtime was Who Wet My Pants? And it's about a bear and his little troop of scouts. And they're going camping and the bear wets his pants and he's trying to figure out who wet his pants because it wasn't him. So anyways, you're going through this book and they have their uniforms on with their vests and their badges. And then on the inside of the cover, the cover art on the inside of the book, if that makes sense, on the inside of the cover is this illustrations of these little merit badges. It's just very, very cute. It's just a cute little book. And anyways, I was reading that and admiring these cute little illustrated patches and thinking like, wow, that would be kind of cool. Like, what if we could do patches, like earn these badges as quilters? Like, what would that look like? That would be fun. And I just had this light bulb moment as I was sitting there in bed, like reading this silly book, thinking like, oh, that would be kind of cool. Like, what would that look like? It snowballed from there. I remember either that night or the next day messaging my group of friends that I was telling you about that we chat every day. Like, hey, what do you think about this idea? Like, would this be cool? Because, I got to run everything by them. In my filter, they will tell me if it is a good idea or if it is a bad idea. In the most loving way, they would tell me that. And they were excited about it. So I just ran with it.
Like I said, when I saw that, wow, it just really hit. Like, I will work for badges. Yes.
Yeah, we joke out like we did it for the badge. You got to do it for the badge. And you got to have all the badges.
And I can't wait till next Monday night when I can take my first badge to my quilt guild and say, look.
What's your first badge going to be? Is it the Quilting Podcast one?
I bought
the founding member.
Yeah.
Nice.
I thought I needed to do more to achieve it. And then I saw you post, people are buying badges. I thought, well, I don't want them to run out. I need to get it.
I need that one. Yeah, those have been going. Yeah, all you have to do to have the founding member badge is to be a founding member. So if you've signed up in the last 2 weeks to be a Quilt Scout, you are a founding member and you deserve that badge. But they sold quickly and I had to do another restock. And I'm supposed to get them today so I can do all these back orders that I have. Poor people have been waiting for their badges and I've been out of stock for like a week.
Oh, wow. Let's talk about Modern Moon Quilt Studio first, and then we'll jump more into Quilt Scouts.
Yeah.
So with Modern Moon Quilt Studio, when did you open?
That would have been either January or February of 2022.
I think if I understood it right, you were selling your patterns with that, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep, correct.
So how exciting was it when you sold that very first pattern?
Well, I want to say my mom bought my first pattern because she was insistent. She's like, I want to be the first one. And she doesn't even quilt, but she wanted my first pattern, which I love that. That's so my mom. She's always been my biggest supporter, my mom and my dad with all of my businesses. So she was my first sale. But then when I launched my first pattern, I just remember being just shocked that people were going to pay me for this thing that I had created. It's like, kind of disbelief at first. You're like, oh my gosh, this is happening. People like the things that I'm offering. Like, this is so cool. And they're going to pay me money for it. Like, this is wow, Yeah, it's always a very, very exciting, fun feeling.
Was there a time when you saw a picture of one of your quilts and you suddenly realized, hey, that's my pattern?
Yeah, that has happened. And it happens occasionally. Yeah, where it just kind of catches me like, oh, wow. And it's funny. I think a moment of that happening that really stands out to me is with a quilt label. So I told you I like to embroider my quilt labels. And a year or two ago, I did just a little online course, basically, because I had realized when I was sharing and posting pictures of my quilt labels, I was getting a lot of engagement with it. People just really liked how they looked, and I was getting a lot of questions about it. So that prompted me to be like, okay, well, if people want to learn how to do this, I'll make an online course so that they can learn how to do the embroidery like I do it. So, anyways, I feel like I have a certain style of doing it with the embroidery, and then I like to put mine at an angle on the corner. It's just my style. It's just how I put them on there. So, anyways, after I launched this course, I remember scrolling Instagram and seeing this quilt label and be like, oh, that looks like one of mine. I'm like, wait, that's not one of mine. That's one of my students who took my online course and had kind of copied the way that I was doing it. It was so exciting and like flattering to see that. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. People are learning from, again, a course that I created. They're enjoying it. And then just to see it come to life for somebody, in an Instagram post, that was pretty cool.
Yeah. With the Quilt Scouts. Now, is that a separate company or is it being run under Modern Moon Quilts?
No, I'm trying to have them be separate entities. I think they kind of play off each other a little bit. There's some things that are shared between the two businesses, like my email, the software that I use to send my emails, like I share that with the two, things like that. But for the most part, no, they're pretty separate. I really wanted Quilt Scouts to be its own thing.
So, what is your vision for Quilt Scouts?
I want Quilt Scouts to be centered around community. So whether it be online community or connecting locally with other scouts. So within our member forum, we have different groups set up for like the state. So I'm able to connect with all the other Colorado Quilt Scouts, and we can get together to go for a hike for quilt photos or get together for a quilt show, things like that, to kind of have more of a social aspect with it, either, like I said, online connecting with people or in person connecting with other Quilt Scouts. I really wanted that to be really prevalent with this membership. And then also adding fun and a sense of adventure to what we're already doing as quilters. I just wanted it to be fun. And I think that we're achieving that with the badges and all the content that we're providing to go along with those badges. I've gotten so many great messages and responses to the launch of Quilt Scouts. They feel motivated again to start quilting and try new things, that they're getting their sojo back, like having these merit badges, kind of dangle the carrot, like I'm getting my sojo back. I haven't enjoyed quilting in forever. I'm just so excited to do this. We've had family members sign up together. I'm specifically thinking of a mom and two daughters that were so excited to do Quilt Scouts. They all joined together. They were talking about, what did she say? That we were talking about, what our troop name's going to be and what badges we're going to earn first. And they're planning this stuff out. So just bringing like fun and excitement into, like I said, between family members who quilt together. So that was a big part of it. So community, just bringing fun and adventure into quilting. And then bigger picture, I really want to do some quilt retreats. I really want to do like a glamping style quilt retreat. So it has, again, that sense of kind of outdoor fun, adventure, summer camp vibes for us adult quilters, but make it a quilt retreat. So I want to do that maybe next summer, next fall. We'll see how that plays out. But yeah, that's the vision I have for it now. I'm sure that'll change with time.
So you just launched Quilt Scouts the other week. How did that go? Did it exceed your expectations?
Boy, did it. I was shocked. I didn't know what to expect. I just wanted to put it out in the world and see what happened. But I had such a huge response. So many people signed up. Yeah, I was beyond excited with the response that we had. And then I had so many people messaging me and emailing me about if they were a non-US resident, if they could join Quilt Scouts. So just internationally, getting people from Canada, France, Australia, Germany. I'm trying to think of all the other countries. I had someone from Hong Kong that wanted to join. I was like, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Yeah, I want to say yes. I want to do this the right way and make sure I'm not making a mess with sales taxes internationally. So I just launched that. So they had to wait another 2 weeks. They very patiently waited, but we finally got it all figured out and now it's gone international. It just blows my mind. But it's so cool and so exciting.
Well, it's growing so fast. Can you share how many people have signed up so far?
Last I checked, I want to say 185. We were approaching 200 members that had actually joined. So yeah.
And that's all within just a couple weeks.
2 weeks. Yeah. So yeah, I have to order more patches.
Well, when I looked into the podcast badge, one of the questions was, what is that podcast focus on? And I thought that was cool because I'm trying to get together with other quilting podcasters. And that's one of the questions I want us to answer when we get together is, what is the focus of your podcast? So I was like, oh, I might be on top of that one pretty soon.
Yeah. Because I feel like there are a lot of different quilting podcasts out there, but they all have a different point of view, different take on things, different audience, so none of them are the same. Even though technically we're all talking about the same thing, we're all talking about quilting. None of them are the same.
No, they come from different perspectives and different information that's being put out. Megan, is there anything else about your businesses that you would like to share?
Well, with Quilt Scouts, I was getting a lot of questions about just how it was structured. So it's a membership. We have two different options, a monthly membership option or a yearly membership option. Both membership options come with all the same access to everything. But if you do a yearly one, you save a little bit. It's 20% off that way. With the membership, you are allowed one free badge every month. So like we're talking about, members get a special coupon code and order a free badge every month that gets shipped to them, as well as all kinds of other goodies, patches, enamel pins, stickers. I've been trying to meet all the requests for different things that I've been getting. For some reason, enamel pins were highly requested. That kind of surprised me because I don't personally collect enamel pins, but apparently lots of other people do. So I had to order enamel pins. So anyways, yes, it's a membership. And
I saw somebody ask the other day, where can they get that hat?
Oh, the hat. Oh, the hat. I don't have the hat. I had intentions of having hats available, and then the production of them didn't make sense. Like, I think I needed to have like 100 of them made. I was like, there's no way I'm selling 100 hats. So I scrapped it. But I have my hat that I just sewed a patch on, right? And I've been wearing it because I just love how it turned out. And people kept asking me, I'm like, I don't have it, but I'm going to try.
I thought maybe you were going to have the patches available and tell them to put them on their own hat.
That was ultimately what I decided. I was like, well, if they have the patch, they can put it on whatever they want. But it's so funny. My sweet friend Anne, she just the other day sewed her patch onto her hat, and she messaged me like, how did you do this? Because this is so hard. Like, how do you get it centered and like sewn onto this thing? You got to like squish it flat. And I was like, I'm sorry. I thought it was going to be better to have you do it yourself, but sorry, Anne, if you're listening.
And share where we can find you online.
So I am on Instagram at Modern Moon Quilt Studio or at Quilt Scouts of America on Instagram. My Modern Moon Quilt Studio is also on Facebook. I'm not on there with my Quilt Scouts yet. You can also email me at modernmoonquiltstudio@gmail.com and my websites. So my website for Modern Moon Quilt Studio is just modernmoonquiltstudio.com, or you can sign up to be a Quilt Scout at quiltscouts.com. Quilt Scouts with an S, plural.
Great. Well, Megan, thank you so much for sharing with me today. It was so much fun to hear your story and to hear about what you're doing.
Thank you so much for inviting me onto the podcast and just asking just great, thoughtful questions. It was such a fun chat. I loved it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You can find more stories on aquilterslife.com or subscribe on your favorite podcast player so each episode will be downloaded automatically. Also, I want to hear about you and your wonderful quilts. please contact me, Paula Chamberlain, through the website to set up an interview. And as always, thanks for listening.